the first thing I noticed was the hem. Not because it looked bad, because it looked decided. I had folded that dress often enough to know exactly where it ended. The navy silk never brushed the top of the shoe. It landed just below the calf in a way my mother used to call forgiving, though nothing about her when she wore it had ever seemed uncertain. The dress was elegant without trying. That was part of why I kept it. Not because it was expensive. Not because it would ever fit me particularly well. Because after she died, there were only a few objects that still seemed to hold her shape, without asking me to explain why that mattered. My sister-in-law Rachel handed the garment bag back to me in my kitchen and said, almost brightly, "I think it actually hangs better now." Now. That word did something cold to me. I did not answer right away. I unzipped the bag slowly, the way you do when you already know you are about to become the unreasonable person in someone else's story. The dress was pressed. The navy silk still caught the light, but the hem had been lifted. The waist had been narrowed, and one of the little covered buttons at the cuff had been replaced with something close, but not right. If you have ever loved an object for where it came from, you know how quickly close can become unbearable. I said, "What happened to it?" Rachel blinked like the question itself was rude. Then she laughed once and said, "Oh, relax, I had Marisol clean it up a little." Clean it up. There are people who describe intrusion with the same voice they use for organizing a junk drawer. I touched the skirt again, then the waist seam. It had absolutely been altered. Not pinned, not temporarily adjusted. Changed. I asked, "You had it tailored?" She crossed her arms, already defensive, already on the side of the room where my reaction was going to be the embarrassing part. "I only shortened it because I would have tripped," she said. "And it was hanging weird on me, so yes, I had it taken in a little. I was trying to make it look nice for the dinner." The dinner, that was the whole event in her mouth. One rehearsal dinner for her friend's second wedding. One night of photographs and catered salmon and borrowed importance. In my hands was the dress my mother had worn to my college scholarship banquet, the same dress she wore the year my father forgot their anniversary and tried to make up for it with tulips from the grocery store. The same dress she wore to my cousin Elena's baptism, standing on the church steps with one hand against her stomach because she was already sick, though she had not told us yet. Rachel knew at least some of that. Enough to know this was not some anonymous formal dress rotating through a family closet. Enough to know I had said yes reluctantly. Enough to know my one condition had been simple. Please don't alter it. I had said that sentence directly when she asked to borrow it 2 weeks earlier. She had shown up at our Sunday lunch flustered and half laughing because the dress she ordered online had arrived looking, in her words, like a shiny tablecloth with sleeves. She said everything else she owned felt wrong. She said she had seen my mother's dress once at the back of my closet when I was looking for winter coats. Then she said the part people always save for last when they need your boundary to sound selfish. It would mean a lot to me. I remember hesitating. My husband Owen was at the sink rinsing salad bowls and said too casually, "Only if you're comfortable." A sentence that places all the weight on you while quietly suggesting the graceful answer would be yes. I said I was nervous because it was delicate. Rachel put a hand to her chest and said, "Maya, I'm not asking to keep it. I just want to wear something beautiful for one night." Beautiful, that nearly got me. People borrow the language of appreciation when what they want is access. So I said yes. Then I added, "But please don't alter it. If it doesn't work as is, just don't wear it." She smiled immediately. "Of course not," she said, "as if I'd touch your mom's dress." And now there it was in front of me, touched in every way that mattered. I looked up and said, "Rachel, I told you not to alter this." She exhaled hard through her nose. "Okay, but you're making it sound dramatic. It was too long and the waist was loose. I paid to have it done properly." Paid. Properly. Useful words in the wrong mouth. As if the care someone bought could replace the permission they skipped. I said, "You weren't supposed to have anything done to it at all." Owen had been quiet up to that point. But then he stepped in with the tone I have come to recognize as the family version of traffic control. "Let's just breathe for a second," he said. I'm sure Rachel thought she was helping. That sentence made me angrier than Rachel had. Not because it was cruel, because it was familiar. because it translated the whole problem from action into intention. And once that happens, the person who got crossed is expected to become a judge of hearts instead of a witness to what actually happened. I said, helping who? Rachel stared at me. Excuse me? Helping who? I repeated, because it wasn't helping me. I didn't ask for it changed. I asked for the exact opposite. Her face shifted then, from defensive to injured. Not sorry, injured. I was trying not to show up looking ridiculous, she said. I thought you'd rather it be worn properly than drag on the ground all night. There it was, the secret logic. In her version, my boundary had not been a boundary. It had been an impractical detail she was free to improve. I looked back down at the dress and saw another thing I had missed. Inside the bag was a tailor slip folded in half. On it, in blue pen, were the words, hem 1.5 in waist and 2 in replace missing cuff button. Replace missing. It had not been missing before. I held up the slip. Did you even notice a button came off? Rachel looked annoyed, not alarmed. It probably came loose when they pressed it. It's basically the same, basically. That was the whole evening distilled into one word. Basically the same dress. Basically the same memory. Basically the same promise. Basically the same respect. Owen said, Maya, it's not ideal, but this can probably be fixed. Probably. Another useful word when someone wants pain reduced to logistics. I asked him, do you hear yourself? He opened his hands like I was rushing him past reason. I'm just saying no one meant harm. People love meaning when harm is already done. I said the harm is that she decided her need to wear it mattered more than my no. Rachel's eyes filled then, but not with the kind of tears that change a room, honestly. These were tears assembling for an audience. I said I was sorry about the button, she snapped, though she had not said sorry once. I honestly thought you'd appreciate that I spent money making it look good instead of dumping it back here wrinkled. That was the sentence that clarified everything. Not the alteration itself. Not even the lie by omission. The expectation of gratitude. What she wanted was not forgiveness. It was endorsement. She wanted me to help narrate this as care. I felt oddly calm after that. Sometimes anger burns hottest, right before it turns into precision. I laid the dress across the back of a chair so the shortened hem was visible between us. Then I said, you didn't return my mother's dress. You returned your version of what my mother's dress should have been. Rachel stared at me. Owen said my name quietly, the way you say someone's name when you want them to become easier for everybody else. But I kept going. I told you not to alter it, I said. You heard me, decided I was being sentimental, and did what was more convenient for you. Then you brought it back and expected me to thank you for crossing the exact line I drew. Rachel said, I did not think you'd act like I vandalized it. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because people always reach for extreme language first, when they need your actual language to sound excessive by comparison. I said, you didn't vandalize it. You overrode me. The room went still. That landed harder than if I had shouted. Because it was true in a way tailoring language could not blur. Rachel grabbed her purse off the counter and said, I can't believe I'm being treated like this after I trusted you enough to borrow something important. Trusted me enough. Another inversion. Another little theft. I said, borrowing isn't trust when the owner said no to a specific thing and you did it anyway. She looked at Owen, not me. That told me more than anything else had. She still thought the real decision-maker in the room might be available if she appealed correctly. Owen, she said, tell her this is insane. He did not answer fast enough, which meant he knew it wasn't insane. He just didn't want the discomfort of admitting it belonged to his side of the family. Rachel muttered, fine, and left. The front door shut harder than necessary. For a while, Owen and I just stood there in the kitchen. The refrigerator hummed. The sink still smelled faintly like lemon soap. I could feel the silk beneath my fingers and hated that I was now touching the dress differently, as if I were meeting it after a small betrayal. Owen finally said she shouldn't have changed it without asking. It was such a carefully measured sentence that I nearly missed what it avoided. Not ruined, not violated, not lied, just shouldn't have. I asked, "Did you know?" He looked genuinely startled. "No." Then, after a pause, "I knew she was worried about the length, but I thought she meant shoes." I believed him, which almost made me sadder. Because if he had known, I could place him cleanly on one side. Instead, he had done the softer thing people do when they hope tension will resolve itself without them ever having to defend the person who was actually crossed. I sat down at the table and smoothed my hand over the skirt. A seam can be redone. A hem can be lowered if there is enough fabric. A button can be replaced more accurately than this one had been. None of that was the point. The point was that my mother's dress had been treated as a problem to solve. A little too long, a little too personal, a little too subject to somebody else's preferences. Owen sat across from me and said, "What do you want to do?" That question saved us more than he realized, not because it fixed anything, because it finally put the decision where it belonged. I said, "First, I'm taking it to my own tailor to see what can be restored." Then I said, "Second, Rachel doesn't borrow anything sentimental from me again. Ever." He nodded slowly. I could see the argument he was deciding not to make. Family peace. Honest mistake. Don't let this become a thing. All the usual tools people reach for when the cleanest solution would require naming disrespect plainly. Instead, he asked, "Do you want me to tell her that?" I said, "No, I'll tell her." And I did. The next morning I sent one message. Not long, not cruel, just exact. I wrote that I hoped the dinner had been lovely. I wrote that I would be having the dress assessed for repair. I wrote that because she altered it, after I explicitly told her not to, I would not be lending her personal items again. And I wrote the sentence the whole situation had been trying to dodge. "You were not wrong because the tailoring was imperfect. You were wrong because you treated my permission like a suggestion." She responded with 3 paragraphs about embarrassment, expense, and how hurtful it was to be painted as malicious. Nothing about my mother. Nothing about the promise. Nothing that suggested she understood why the dress had never been just fabric in the first place. That, more than the hem, told me I was done explaining. A week later, my tailor, an older woman named Corinne with silver glasses on a chain and the steady hands of someone who has repaired other people's emergencies for decades, spread the dress across her work table. She ran her fingers along the seams and asked, "Did this belong to someone important?" I said, "My mother." Corinne nodded as if that explained every tension in the room. Then she said, "I can get some of it back." Some of it? That turned out to be enough. Not perfect, not untouched, but enough. When I picked it up, the hem was lowered as far as the fabric allowed. The waist was softened. The cuff button had been matched more closely. It would never be exactly the same dress again. Then again, neither would I. Grief teaches you strange measurement. What remains? What can be restored? What somebody else had no right to decide was adjustable. I hung the dress back in my closet that night and zipped the bag closed myself. For the first time since Rachel returned it, I did not feel only anger. I felt recognition. Some relationships do not reveal themselves in the big disasters. They reveal themselves the moment someone crosses a small, sacred line and then asks you to call the crossing kindness. If I learned anything useful from the dress coming back smaller than memory, it is this. Be careful of the person who treats your no as a rough draft. They are not misunderstanding you. They are editing you.
Thank you for watching. If this story pulled you in, do me one favor. Hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so the next one finds you the moment it drops. Remember, nothing is ever just what it seems. See you on the next one.